Well, as far as international updates are concerned, we're getting a big one. Rishi Sunak, who's one of the top contenders for the next UK Prime Minister post, is saying that I will crack down on Islamist extremism. He has set out an ambitious plan to tackle Islamist extremism and protect Britain from terrorism. He says he will refocus the failing PREVENT program to Islamist extremism, the UK's most significant terror threat. And he will widen the government's definition of extremism to encompass those who vilify the country, to weed out and cut off organizations that are promoting extremism in the UK, strengthen their existing terrorism legislation to crack down on the dangers of extremism in prison as well. So, big declaration coming in from Indian origin Rishi Sunak, who's one of the two top contenders as far as the big post at 10 Downing Street is concerned. My colleague Sanjay Suri is joining us over the phone line. Sanjay, how is this message being received?
Well, it is a very firm message. It is a kind of message people need to hear. He has said very clearly that there is no greater duty for a prime minister than to keep his people safe. Islamist extremism is one of the most serious threats to Britain. There have been several cases of terrorist attacks. The reason that we do not hear of even more such is because the intelligence services have been very active and they have tracked groups sufficiently to prevent a number of terrorist attacks. That clearly is the kind of effort and exercise that does not make news for the best of reasons. But the threat continues to be pervasive. He has said that there is a government program called PREVENT that is intended to prevent terrorist, violent and disruptive activities, that he will refocus that on Islamist extremism and radicalization towards that end, and that he will put resources into that. But what is even more significant is that he has said that he will extend the laws to cover those who vilify the country. Clearly, there will be issues there about freedom of expression, but clearly this is a very firm message that he's sending out, and the kind of message people would very definitely want to hear.
So, Sanjay, is this a message that was expected from somebody like Rishi Sunak? Is this something that has been discussed within his party or the polity of UK for some time? Or is this something that is erupting or coming out as his personal stamp as he fights for the top post?
So it is the latter. It is his personal position that has been taken, no doubt, in consultation with experts, with people in government, with other leaders of the Conservative Party who are backing him, because he is coming up with a package and he is revealing and announcing aspects of it as the campaign goes along on what he stands for and what he would do were he to be elected. And this has arisen out of those consultations. What is quite telling is that he has taken a position on three aspects so far that are not going to please a number of Pakistanis. First, he has, as we know, taken a very firm line on China. Clearly, that's a statement that China itself has reacted to. Second, he said that he would crack down on grooming gangs that target underage girls for sexual exploitation. The fact is that almost all members of all such gangs who have been arrested so far have been of Pakistani origin. And third, what we see now, it is again a fact that much of the Islamist extremism we have seen in Britain has arisen from the Pakistan origin community. So it is not the case that, he's of Indian origin and tackling and targeting Pakistanis, but as it happens, he has a program in place for Britain, and there are certain people and certain sections that will be more unhappy than others.
Right. Sanjay, I request you to just hold on with me. Let me just take a quick reaction also from a senior fellow of ORF Strategic expert Sushant Sareen, who's joining us. Sushant, this is a very President Macron kind of a message, who is also someone who was criticized around the world for the very tough stance that he took against quote-unquote Islamic extremism. Do you believe that is a message and that's a political step that is actually gaining ground in Europe and more?
Look, whether it's gaining ground mainland Europe, it probably is, but I don't know about Britain. I believe Sanjay is in a better position to describe Britain, because already, people say London is not London anymore, it's Londonistan. Now, the thing is that the message or the statement of Rishi Sunak, I think, is unexceptionable. And it's a correct position. But given his background, I think this could end up ruling him out of the race for the Prime Minister.
So you feel this is a big gamble for him?
Well, it is a kind of a gamble. Perhaps he feels this very strongly, as do many people, even within the Conservative Party. But I suspect that, there is such level of wokeness and political correctness in Britain these days that anybody who makes a statement like this, especially somebody like a Rishi Sunak, who has an Indian, who comes from an Indian heritage, a Hindu heritage, incidentally, I think for somebody to say this as openly and as publicly as he has done, I think he might have just killed his candidature. I could be wrong.
Sushant, just request you to hold on. Let me take that to Sanjay Suri. Sanjay, what do you make of that? Is this too much of a gamble for him? Will it upset too many people?
I doubt that it will kill his candidature. The fact is that he is speaking to the wider constituency of Conservative Party members. And clearly, there is a very high level of concern among Conservative Party members about this kind of threat. It has been their politics, and it has been the statement and the view expressed by many members and senior leaders of the Conservative Party that more needs to be done to tackle extremism of an Islamist kind. And therefore, this message is consistent with what is an overwhelmingly, and not just majority, conservative view. And therefore, he is speaking for that. No doubt it is true that there will be people who will discount this or seek to attribute this to his Indian origins. We will certainly hear that kind of criticism coming from the Pakistani camp. But again, that is not the fear of such criticism from a small section cannot be a reason not to take a stand that appears in line with the majority view.
Okay. Sushant, coming back to you, having said what you have said, I think it is still a very important message coming in from a prime ministerial post hopeful that something like this is being mentioned and emphasized by him. That in itself is a departure from previous times where nobody wanted to talk about it.
No, I entirely agree with what you are saying. I think it's a very important message. I think it is very important to say that, the kind of stuff which has been happening, especially in Britain, needs to be curbed and to not mince your words about it. The only thought which comes to my mind is that, given the kind of liberal lynch mobs and woke lynch mobs which are there in the West these days, Mr. Sunak might have opened himself to charges of Islamophobia and rather hysterical charges of Islamophobia. Now, the moment you mention about Islamic extremism, the moment you talk about Islamic radicalism and some of these terror groups which operate and which receive some degree of support from the larger community in many of the Western countries, the first reaction is you are Islamophobic. And then that becomes, the liberal media takes it on, and then they create this entire, this entire climate around this particular statement.
No, I get what you're saying, which is why I also mentioned the example of the French President Macron, because he was also criticized within and outside for the very tough stance that France took under his leadership. And possibly Rishi Sunak is also taking a leaf out of his book, because this is something which may not still be politically correct, but on ground a lot of people are feeling frustrated over these issues. Maybe he's wanting to tap into that.
No, maybe he does. And so, look, this could very well work in his favor, right? But my own sense is that it could very easily backfire.
Okay.
If it was somebody else saying this, he might have got away with it. But Rishi Sunak, I'd be pleasantly surprised if, this does not kill his candidature, number one. Number two, don't compare France with Britain or France with any of the other countries. I think the French have shown far greater degree of clarity on this issue than any other European or Western country. So
true, they are
don't think
different
we really
and they have
compare
had
them.
different stances too. Britain is a very different society as well and has had different politics. One issue that Sanjay Suri, my colleague, mentioned from London was the issue of grooming gangs. Now, that has been a very festering issue in London and England predominantly. And the charges in the past have been, including right down to the police on ground, is that they don't do anything because of the fear of the label of Islamophobia.
Precisely. And frankly, something like the grooming gangs, had it happened in any other country, there would have been a huge furor. But in Britain, what we have seen is that there has been a kind of a cover-up. And I don't blame, who don't want to go whole hog after these grooming gangs, simply because, as you correctly say, that they are accused of Islamophobia. So there is this kind of Islamic exceptionalism which is coming in Western societies. I don't know whether this is guilt-driven or something else which is at play. But the moment anybody takes any resolute action against this kind of behavior, the first charge and the first line of offense from the other side is Islamophobia. And everybody else kind of just, gets so bogged down by it and gets so, is so fearful of being labeled as such that they prefer to let it pass. Why should I put my neck on the block? That's the kind of attitude because of the kind of environment which has been created.
Right. We'll leave it at that. We'll have to see how this message is received and how this plays as far as the prime ministerial candidature is concerned. But speaking of that, Liz Truss, who is being seen as a front-runner to replace the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, has a small lead over her rival Rishi Sunak as it stands. That lead is, of course, changing day by day. My colleague Sanjay Suri reports from a community kitchen started by UK Prime Ministerial candidate Rishi Sunak.
I'm here